everybody, Blue Dooley. We're trying out the microphones today, so I'm not sure how good the audio is going to sound, or if this particular GoPro can even use an external mic. We're going to find out. Today is 4th of July, Tuesday, and the first thing we're starting off with is working on the truck, because, I'll turn you around here, as you can see, I have a little bit of a coolant leak. And it's coming from the lower radiator hose again, that little bracket that bolts to the side of the block, which is just an absolute pain in the ass to get on and off. That's what we're starting out with today. And then we'll get the air compressor mounted where it's supposed to go today. So first things first, we need to get the coolant starting to drain. So let me get a bucket and we'll get that going. Also, pro tip, when you're pulling this out, be sure not to pull it out too hard or it'll pull completely out and you'll end up making a mess. Not sure how well we're going to see in there. We can actually fit a little piece of hose over the drain plug on the radiator so you don't make quite as much of a mess. And now that we've made a mess, I'll get the intake out of the way, then we'll loosen the belt. And I'd like to leave the alternator in place so I'm just not taking everything apart. Except I think now you have to take the alternator out because it's also bolted to that bracket. So we'll come back here in a bit. So I got the alternator out of the way because it bolts to this bracket. The belt tensioner bolts to this bracket. The lower radiator hose is bolted, well, goes to this bracket. And then the air compressor for the air conditioning, also all one big giant pain in the ass bracket. And it's leaking between the bracket and the block again. I thought I cleaned it up really good and sealed it. The funny thing is it doesn't leak when it's running. It only leaks after it's been sitting for more than 12 hours, I guess you could say. So yeah, no leaks through the week, and then get up Sunday or Saturday morning, go do some chores, and then come back about noon Saturday, and there's a puddle underneath it. So highly annoying, especially because it's just a pain in the ass to get that air conditioner compressor unbolted from that bracket. As you can't get a socket on it, you have to use a box end wrench, and they're like 7 miles long. So I'm not going to bore you with that, but there's 3 13mm bolts around the water neck, and then there's 3 15mm bolts down by the air compressor that I'll have to come off, and we'll take a better look at it when we get this out of the truck. But I don't really have a good spot to put you on time lapse, and I'm not sure how much you're going to be able to see anyways, so let me just get it off and then we'll come back. Got the lower radiator hose pulled up out of the way. I have a bungee cord kind of holding the air compressor up out of the way. The 3 bolts behind the air compressor for the air conditioning are 15mm, and they are a son of a bitch to get out if you don't have like a ratcheting wrench. You need a short 6-point 15mm socket, and all I have are 12-point sockets. But those are kind of frustrating to get out. But with those out of the way, just got to get this hose loose, and then these 3 13mm bolts. There's one up here and then one on each side, and then that whole bracket will finally come out of there. Of course, even if you drain all the coolant out of the radiator, the way the radiator hose and where this is on the block, it's still going to be full of coolant because the radiator hose kind of goes up over the intercooler piping. So that makes it a kind of a pain in the ass and a mess. So, and if you don't have a pair of these for these hose clamps, they're kind of a pain in the ass. But these hose clamp pliers, man, they're like there. Get a little bit. You can free it up. Okay, definitely there. Wrap the lemon around. Basically, leave it around. Keep these on there pretty darn small. You have to keep it moving. What I'll do, put it in a wrench. Just do this. Or look at the face. Or just go this way and everything is better. But it's not easy when you work on this again, as old as it is. Actually, it's probably easy when you work on it, it's not a dodge. As I mentioned, a fair number of problems come from it being a dodge. I actually locked it on. There. Very wet. Done. I should look how we take that stuff off. Maybe I didn't want to. There we go. A little bit. Set that down. I don't want this in the AC compressor using bracket. Probably because I so. Yeah, so it goes in here when it has 50 people in. Well, anyway. Well, it is getting light, so. It's gonna work. It's working, of course. That's the line. Alright, take these down. Inside the hair. Try to get this off the line. And it can work. You're going to help. Put a little RT around it, and help. Basically, that RT in, some RT, and we'll fix it. Because I said, those turns that it only leaks after it's done sitting. And got that one up. Doesn't look like a stretcher again, so we'll that in. What's the one that's already goes in here, but well, or maybe it actually wasn't leaking out of there, and it actually looks like it's maybe leaking out of the water pump, because that's all dry, but there's some coming down. Right on top of the gear case cover, down the front of the block. So it looks like I might have misdiagnosed it and wasted a whole bunch of time. Of course, you still gotta drain all the coolant out of it to get it to get the water pump off. Oh, nothing like doing something 3 times. Let me get some paper towels. Actually, unfortunately, looks like I'm going to need a water pump, because it's, yep, there is definitely coolant coming out of that weep hole. It's going to be hard to see in there because, of course, the sun's shining from this way. But I got that bracket put back in, got the water pump put back in, belt, all that stuff's bolted back together. And the air compressor, I think, is actually going to live right where it's sitting. I'd wanted to tuck it up here by the cowl, but there's just, between the power cable for the starter and the air conditioner lines, and of course the fender slopes down, really wasn't a good spot to mount it there. So then I thought I'd mount it out here, kind of out in the open, and I can actually push the battery back far enough. I can put a bolt through the battery tray, and then I'll take this battery tray out, run a piece of angle iron out, bolt the compressor to the battery tray. It'll be tucked up nice, neat, out of the way. I'll just have to get some air line to run around to the rest of it. But I think that's going to be the easiest place to mount it, where it's easily accessible if I need to change the fuse in it, if I need to do anything to it. It's a Harbor Freight Pittsburgh air compressor, so it's not a high dollar unit. So I can run with this and see if I'm happy with where it's located at, and then if this one ever burns out, I'll just get a little nicer unit and put it right in the same spot. So I got some PB blaster sitting on them 2 nuts, because of course this battery tray I don't think I've ever had out of the truck. So I'll get that out, and then I'll get the air compressor mounted up to this battery box basically, and get it wired back in. But I think that's going to be a pretty good location for it. Also need to fill it back up with coolant. Just waiting for the RTV to finish drying, and yeah. So let me get this out, and we'll get some metal cut and some bolts ran and see what we come up with. So I got the compressor bolted into where I wanted it, between the overflow tank of the battery. There's just a hair bit of room between the compressor housing and the intake for the engine. Let's see here, if I put you over here, you might stay put. That's all right. But I am happy with where that's mounted at, so I'll take this out, shoot some paint on the steel, and then I can bolt the truck back together. I will have to go to Napa and get a fitting and some more hose to snake around the filter and tie in to that part of hose right there. We'll come. Oh yeah. Finally got the AC charged to where the compressor isn't kicking on and off constantly. She's blowing cold despite the doors and windows being wide open. That's gonna be a win in my book. Yeah, now it's July. Kinda need the air conditioner. And there's no water dripping out of the pump, not dripping out of that bracket. What I need to do now, turn the truck off, unhook my AC gauges, and I'm going to call it a day. Sometime this week I'll stop at Napa, grab the fittings and a few little odds and ends I need to hook the air compressor back up, and that's when we'll pick this video back up. Okay, it is Saturday the 7th. First part of this video was filmed on 4th of July, and I had to go to, well, 3 stores eventually to get all the little miscellaneous fittings I needed to finish hooking up the air compressor, because of course Napa didn't have them. The plumbing supplies place had every fitting except the 2 I needed. Lowe's also didn't have any of the ones I needed, but they at least had enough I could make what I needed to fit. So I'm going to grab those out of the Jeep right now and show you what I got. So this is what I had set up before. This actually threaded into the air compressor. The pressure switch rode in here. And then I kind of put this goofy bend in this little piece, like so. Compression fitting out to the air system. But nobody had this crush fitting that would screw in this side. So what I had to do was get a new T with the only compression fittings they had with this end. So that'll be my T, and then I had to neck down, so that'll be where the pressure switch ties in at. So of course need to get my plumber's tape out, thread lock this stuff together, and then we'll get underneath the hood. Got my T fitting. This end will actually run out to the air tank, the gauge, and the air horns. This side is for the switch, and then this side, of course, feeds from the compressor. We'll have to use this piece of steel again, but I'll put some tape on that, and then we'll get this section in the truck with the airline on it. Of course, got our patio umbrella out here for some shade. Of course, getting this started with this hose on might be the trick. Alright, I know you threaded in there because I've had you in there before. DOT airline is pretty stiff. There we go. Now we got it. You'd actually come underneath the negative post on the battery. Loosen that up. Let's see if we can't snake her through there. Yeah, like I said, not very flexible even when it's warm or hot. So if you're wondering about all the things I have hooked up to this battery, the relay, of course, needs power from this battery and a ground. The air compressor, power and ground. And then, since there's more room on this side of the truck, I actually have a battery tender hooked up. That way in the winter time, if I know I'm going to be not driving it for an entire weekend or something, I can just plug that in as well as the block heater, and the truck's always good to go. And then we'll probably come behind the air conditioning lines here. We're going to try to anyways. There we go. Of course it would go Not exactly where I wanted it. Then we'll move you over here. So I got longer than I needed, just to be sure I had enough, and I could run it up, get it tied out of the way. This is a Halidex pressure switch. And it will turn the compressor off at 120 psi. You could also use this for low air pressure light. I don't know the part number off the top of my head. Let's actually get this where I can hold it better, and then try to thread tape it. Yep, and that. More guts. See in place. Use a wrench to this, I got it. If you're using the push locks, you do need to make sure you don't bugger the end up too bad. Okay. I'll have to, of course, zip tie all the wires up a little nicer and neater. And there's actually a little body hole right here we might be able to use. So the fuel pump and the air compressor will both kick on. And I have the air gauge, pressure gauge mounted in here. It's not 100% flush because I'm using this gauge pod upside down. And I need to find a better gray to spray it and kind of smooth it out a little better. So I'll turn the key on here. And hopefully she'll start building some air pressure. That is a cheap Harbor Freight air compressor, so probably not going to get really fast fill times, but that's all right. For what I'm using it for, it'll work. It's designed to fill up an air tire, so it should fill up an air tank. Apparently, we have an air leak. Huh. Well, that's interesting. Apparently, I didn't have that part of the hose hooked up at all. So I guess I'll go find that fitting. And we'll try it again. So it was sitting with a brand new little crush sleeve right on the workbench. I'm going to clean that end up a little bit better. You do want these ends fairly square. Of course, it's kind of hard to see with all this shit in the way. It's also kind of hard to work on. So for the air system itself, comes out of the compressor, comes around, follows along the fender, up here to the T. This is the pressure switch that'll turn the compressor on and off. And then the air line and the compressor, or the power lead for the electrics, run across the firewall. To this ugly mess of wires, and it tees here. The T actually goes into the cab through the hole where the clutch master cylinder was. The other side loops down, runs between the body and the fender, and comes out and goes to my air tank. I think the air tank actually might be where the little bit of a leak is. So the green wire that actually runs over to the pressure switch, it and my CB both have a fuse tap that runs to the truck's ABS. So when the key's on, the ABS gets power, and then the CB radio and that pressure switch get power. So instead of going to ground or a buzzer, this actually just comes over here to a 30 amp relay, which isn't, it might be a little warm. Not as warm as the pump itself, but it's tucked up in the battery tray. And then of course the other side comes up here to the negative post on the battery. The positive side has a wire running out to the relay. And when the relay is energized, it goes from the battery straight to the compressor. The compressor has a, I think a 15 amp fuse on it. And then the relay and the entire circuit has a 10 amp fuse for that. That's going to do it on the air system. So you can get onboard air kits from a bunch of different places, and they're all pretty much going to come with a compressor, a switch, the wiring, and some lines. Some of them might have tanks with them, or they'll have the compressor, the switch, the lines, and a tank, and then everything you want to run off of it, you just have to plumb it into your tank. That's pretty much the basic setup for an onboard air. Of course, you could go a little fancy, and they do make engine-driven air compressors that you could probably purchase, but that would be a significant higher investment. Of course, an engine-driven compressor would flow a lot more air, which you typically see those on a lot of the tire service trucks. If they don't have an onboard air compressor running off an inverter, they have an engine-driven compressor. I know Les Schwab has a lot of those trucks, and those things will fill up a semi-truck tire real fast. So kind of depends on how much air you need. Since right now all I'm running is the air horns, I don't need a ton of flow, a ton of CFM, or a super awesome pump really. Now the plan is to put air ride on the rear of the truck someday, but when I do that I'll probably increase the compressor, or I might actually just run this one for a little while and then on a payday or something upgrade my air compressor to a nicer unit. And then all I'll have to do is just basically unhook this one, trash it, and then just plug the new one pretty much right into what's already wired in the truck. I didn't show too much detail on changing the water pump. The water pump on a 12 valve and the 24 valve, they're only held on by 2 bolts. So you just have to take the belt off, and then in my case there's a little wire loom bracket that you got to pull out of the way. Put a bolt on one side, bolt on the other side, comes right up. 5, maybe 10-minute job to change the water pump on a 12 valve or a 24 valve. So that's going to wrap this video up. Let's get over here to the shade a little bit. That's going to do it for this video. I'm going to throw the air cleaner back on the truck, call it a day, as unfortunately it's now 3 o'clock, which is getting to be the hottest part of the day for me, and I don't like the heat. So that's going to do it for this video. Be sure to subscribe so you can see more stuff on the dually. I got RC projects I still got to work on. I got a trailer to build still. Lots of fun stuff coming up. I'm trying to work on getting some stuff worked out for streaming with some people, but I haven't heard back on any of my emails I sent out yet. But I did kind of send them out late, so I probably won't even expect to hear back from anybody until next week as it is. So definitely be sure to subscribe so you can see more stuff, and like, because it helps out with the algorithms. And I hope you had a good weekend. We'll catch you later.